Would you have taken $300,000 to walk away from your boyfriend? I know about you and my son, his mother said before I even sat down. Okay, lean in because I need to tell you something I've replayed 1,000 times in my head. Picture this. I'm sitting across from my boyfriend's mother, completely blindsided, when she shoves a check across the table. $100,000. And her icy gaze tells me the price isn't just to walk away from Enzo, it's to disappear from his entire life. What do you do when someone tries to buy you out of love? My heart was absolutely hammering. We'd been together for 8 months, and I was so nervous meeting her. But she just rolled her eyes, like I was some annoying fly, and slid that check, made out to my name, right across the polished mahogany. 8 months is long enough for this little experiment, don't you agree? She purred, her voice dripping with condescension. I just stared at that check. $100,000. My mind went blank, then raced. Student loans?
Gone.
My dad's medical bills?
Covered.
This wasn't just money, it was freedom. It could change everything. Then she leaned back in her expensive leather chair, a chilling smirk playing on her lips. Love doesn't pay for private schools or get you invited to charity galas, dear. I sit on this company's board. Your little marketing career here? It could end tomorrow with one phone call to HR about inappropriate conduct. My hands started shaking so violently I had to clench them under the table. Are you threatening me? I whispered, disbelief warring with a rising fury. She just laughed, a cold, brittle sound.
No, darling.
I'm offering you an opportunity. Take the money, submit your resignation. Tell Enzo you found a better opportunity in another city. Make it clean and everyone wins. You have 48 hours, she said, dismissing me with a languid wave of her hand. After that, I make your life here very, very difficult. But I didn't need 48 hours. Not for a second. The rage surged through me, overpowering the fear, overpowering the temptation of that money. Right there in her office, I grabbed that check. I ripped it in half, then in quarters, then into tiny, useless eighths. The pieces fluttered onto her pristine Persian rug, like mocking confetti. Her lips curled into a wicked grin, then she burst out laughing, watching me. Did that make you feel good? She taunted. I can always write another. I walked out without saying a single word. My heart was still pounding, but now it was with a mix of defiance and absolute certainty. Before I let that moment fade, I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of the ripped check, my evidence. Then I collected the scraps, carefully tucked them into an envelope, and stashed them in my desk drawer. This wasn't over. The very next morning, another check appeared on my desk. Same amount, same name. But this time, it came with a little yellow sticky note. Last chance. I just looked at it, took another picture for my growing file, and shoved it into my drawer. I could have gone to Enzo then. Showed him the checks, exposed his mother. But I didn't. I don't know if it was pride or a gut feeling that this needed to play out differently, but I held back. Instead, I threw myself into work like a madwoman. I stayed late every single night, triple-checked every single campaign, every single email. If she wanted to make my life difficult, I would be so utterly perfect, so bulletproof, she'd have absolutely no ammunition. Enzo, bless his heart, noticed my dedication. He thought I was gunning for a promotion, that I was just driven. He'd bring me dinner at my desk, kiss me when he thought no one was looking. You're incredible, you know that? He'd say, watching me prep for some major client presentation. Mom's going to love you when she finally meets you properly. Oh, if only you knew, I'd think, a chill running down my spine. 48 hours passed, and just like she promised, my life at work became an absolute nightmare. My clients started calling with impossible demands. Deadlines got moved up without warning, completely out of the blue. The sales team, who I usually got along great with, suddenly had issues with all my campaigns. I knew it was her. I knew it in my bones. But how could I prove it? Then came the announcement. A restructuring. My marketing department was being reorganized, and I was being transferred to a satellite office 2 hours away. Effective immediately. Enzo was furious. This doesn't make sense, he said at dinner that night, his brow furrowed with confusion. You're the best marketing director we have. Why would they transfer you? I just pushed pasta around my plate, trying to sound casual. Maybe it's a good opportunity. 2 hours away. I'll talk to HR tomorrow. My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Then one weekend, Enzo called to cancel our date. My mom's forcing me to go to this charity gala. Major donors will be there. I can't get out of it. I knew. I just knew it was another one of her schemes. But this one felt bigger. I saw the photos online the next morning, splashed across every society page. Enzo in a tuxedo, looking dapper, next to a stunning woman in a designer gown. The caption screamed, "Tech heir Enzo and heiress Sienna make stunning couple at charity gala." I called in sick, crawled back into bed, and cried until my eyes felt like they were burning holes in my head. In the afternoon, his mom, somehow, got a hold of my number. A text message. Just one. "There's a family dinner tomorrow night. We'll be announcing Enzo's engagement to Sienna." My blood ran cold. The audacity. I typed back, my fingers shaking with a mixture of disbelief and fury. He doesn't even know her. Her reply came instantly. "He'll learn to love her. Men always do when the woman is beautiful and suitable. Remember to cash in the check before you disappear." That was it. That was the final straw. I hadn't taken her dirty money, and I wasn't about to disappear. I marched straight to HR. I had all the checks, the photos, the text messages, the proof of bribery, and all the evidence of her tampering with my work. While I was there, Enzo called me. "You need to come here now," he said, his voice strange. Not angry exactly. Something else. "To your parents' house?" "Enzo, I don't think." "Please," he insisted. "Just come." I drove to their sprawling estate, my stomach a knot of nerves. I stepped into the opulent dining room, filled with board members and their spouses, their faces a mixture of expectation and curiosity. Sienna was there, sitting near Enzo. His mother stood up, champagne glass in hand, beaming. "I want to make an important announcement," she declared, her voice ringing with triumph. But before she could finish, Enzo stood up. My breath caught in my throat. He looked at me, then at the room. "I've been dating her for 8 months," he said, his voice clear and strong. He walked straight over to me, pulled out a small box, and started to open it. That's when his mother absolutely lost it. "If you propose, you're out of here. No inheritance, no company position, nothing," she shrieked. Enzo didn't even flinch. "Fine," he said, looking her dead in the eye. "I'll send my resignation letter tomorrow." His mom gasped, a theatrical, dramatic sound. "You're throwing it all away for her? I'll have you both fired then." "Actually," I said, finding my voice, a calm I didn't know I possessed settling over me. "I just came from a meeting with HR." I pulled out my phone. 3 checks, totaling $300,000. All bribes to get me to leave your son. All documented. All reported. My voice gained strength with every word. She tried to pay me to disappear. Then she sabotaged my work. Then she tried to illegally transfer me to force my resignation. The room erupted. Board members were talking over each other, a cacophony of shocked whispers and angry exclamations. Enzo's mother tried to explain herself, to justify her actions, but it was too late. They called for an emergency vote right there on the spot. And within minutes, she was removed from the board for violating fiduciary duty and creating a hostile work environment. Then, to my astonishment, they offered Enzo the CEO position. He accepted. But there was a condition. I had to keep my position, without any retaliation. That's when she absolutely, completely lost it. 2 board members stood up, one making a phone call, as her voice grew louder and sharper, a screeching, furious sound. She pointed at me, calling me names I won't even repeat. She swore the board would regret this decision, threatened legal action against every single person in that room. Security arrived within minutes. 2 men in dark suits approached her calmly, asking her to come with them. She refused, her voice escalating another level, grabbing her purse and throwing it across the room. It slammed against the wall near where I was standing. I flinched, but I stood my ground. The board members watched in stunned silence as security took her by the arms and guided her toward the door. She twisted around, her eyes blazing, and screamed at Enzo that he was dead to her. The door closed with a soft click, and the room went silent. Just the sound of people shifting in their chairs, clearing their throats, avoiding eye contact. I stood there, my hands shaking uncontrollably, my legs feeling like jelly. One board member approached me, his face grim, and told me they'd be in touch through official channels. Then, slowly, everyone started to leave. Enzo took my hand without saying a word, and we walked out of the house, through the quiet gardens, to his car. The night air felt cold against my flushed face. We got in, and he started driving, neither of us speaking for what felt like an eternity. My mind kept replaying every single moment. The check screenshots on my phone, her face when the board voted, the sound of her screaming. I looked over at Enzo. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. A terrible thought crept into my mind. Had I just ruined everything? Maybe I should have handled it differently. Maybe going to HR was too much. Maybe I should have just taken the money and disappeared, just like she wanted. My stomach churned, already dreading Monday, when everyone at work would know. Enzo pulled up in front of my apartment building, turned off the car. We sat in silence for another minute before he finally spoke. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice raspy. "Together." I nodded, but honestly, I didn't feel convinced. We went upstairs. The second we were inside, I was already on my laptop. I forwarded every single email with evidence to my personal account. I saved copies of the check photos to 3 different places. I created a folder, meticulously organized by date. Enzo paced back and forth across my living room, talking on his phone to his lawyer. I heard him explaining what happened at dinner, asking about next steps. The lawyer's voice was faint, but it sounded serious. Enzo's face looked utterly exhausted, stressed beyond belief. He hung up, sank onto the couch, and buried his head in his hands. I sat next to him and we talked. We talked about Monday, about the swirling rumors. We went through every possible scenario. What if the board changed their minds? What if his mother sued? What if HR fired me anyway? We talked in circles for hours. Around midnight, we tried to sleep, but I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. Enzo was awake too, beside me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his mother's furious face. Sunday morning, my phone started buzzing before I was even fully awake. 12 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. 3 voicemails. I played the first one. A woman identified herself as a reporter from a business news site, asking for comment on the boardroom incident. The second was another reporter, asking about my relationship with Enzo. The third, someone else, asking about allegations of bribery. My heart started racing. I showed Enzo. His phone was worse. 23 missed calls. Voicemail box full. He played a few. Family members, demanding to know what happened, asking if the rumors were true. His mother's lawyer, leaving a message about legal representation, urging him to call back immediately. We both just turned our phones off, sat on the couch, feeling utterly trapped. Monday morning at dawn, my phone buzzed with an email from HR, subject line, urgent and formal. My hands were shaking as I opened it. It requested a detailed written statement about all incidents of bribery and retaliation, due by the end of the day. They'd issued a formal preservation notice for all related documents and communications. The email used words like investigation, official record, and potential misconduct. Everything felt suddenly real and irreversible. I got dressed in my most professional clothes and drove to the office. My badge still worked when I scanned it. I took the elevator to my floor, walked to my desk, and everything was gone. My computer monitor? Missing. My files?
Cleared out.
My desk drawers? Empty. There was a yellow sticky note on the bare desk. Report to room 847 on the 8th floor. No name, no explanation. My face burned, my eyes stinging. I picked up the note and walked back to the elevator. The 8th floor was eerily quiet. Room 847 was a small office with a window overlooking the parking lot, a desk, a chair, and nothing else. Another note said HR would contact me shortly and to wait here. I sat down, feeling completely isolated. This felt like punishment, even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. An hour later, Audrey Thornton from HR knocked. She was maybe 40, with short dark hair, carrying a leather folder. She introduced herself and asked me to follow her to a conference room. No windows, just buzzing fluorescent lights. She sat across from me, opened her folder. "This is a formal complaint intake process," she explained. "Please start from the beginning. Tell me everything." I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos of the checks. I walked her through the timeline. The first meeting in his mother's office, the second check on my desk, the impossible deadlines that started after I refused the money, the sudden transfer order, the charity gala setup with Sienna. Audrey took notes the entire time, asking specific questions about dates, times, who else was present. Witnesses? Documentation? I showed her the emails about the transfer, the text messages from his mother. The meeting lasted 2 hours. By the end, I felt both relieved that someone was finally listening and exposed, like I'd revealed too much. Audrey said she'd be in touch and warned me not to discuss the investigation with coworkers. Meanwhile, I found out later, board counsel visited Enzo in his temporary executive office. They clarified that the CEO offer was interim only. He'd need to go through full vetting and background checks. They flagged potential conflict of interest issues with me still employed at the company. They asked detailed questions about our relationship timeline and whether there had been any preferential treatment. Enzo's face went pale as he realized how incredibly complicated this was going to be. Walking through the hallways that week, I felt eyes on me constantly. Whispers followed me, dying down when I got too close. Some colleagues I'd worked with for months suddenly avoided eye contact. Others shot me curious, or even hostile, stares. I heard my name mentioned in conversations that instantly stopped when I approached. Someone even left a printed article about the boardroom incident on the printer near my temporary office. I had become the office scandal, whether I wanted that role or not. By Wednesday, I was officially excluded from team meetings. An email from my team lead stated I was in a temporary review period and wouldn't be included in project discussions. My active campaigns were reassigned to other people, without explanation. Nobody asked for my input or even transition notes. I sat in my borrowed office on the 8th floor, feeling completely useless. I checked my email obsessively, but nothing came. I tried to work on general research, but I had no assignments. I started to wonder if speaking up had been worth becoming a corporate pariah. Thursday morning brought an email from HR scheduling a formal relationship disclosure meeting for me and Enzo that afternoon. I read it 3 times, my hands shaking slightly, realizing we'd have to sit there, together, answering questions about us like we were being interrogated. The conference room felt sterile and cold when I arrived. Enzo was already sitting on one side of the table. I took a chair on the opposite side. 3 feet of polished wood between us, like a barrier. Audrey walked in with another HR rep I didn't recognize, both carrying thick folders and legal pads. They asked when we first met, how the relationship started, whether anyone at work knew before now. I answered each question carefully, weighing every word, hyper-aware of how everything sounded. They wanted to know if Enzo had ever given me preferential treatment on projects or promotions. They asked if I'd ever received benefits or opportunities because of our relationship. Enzo's jaw was tight as he explained that we'd kept things completely separate, that my work performance had absolutely nothing to do with us dating. The questions kept coming for over an hour, clinical, uncomfortable, reducing 8 months of genuine connection to a potential liability that needed to be managed and documented. When we finally left, we walked to our cars separately, without speaking. I felt like the relationship itself had been put on trial and found guilty of something we couldn't quite name. Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Sienna. "Could you meet for coffee somewhere off campus?" I stared at the message for a full minute, suspicious, but also incredibly curious. We met at a small place 2 blocks from the office. She was already in a corner booth, looking nervous, nothing like the confident heiress from the gala photos. She started talking before I even sat down, apologizing for being used as a prop in his mother's scheme. She explained that his mother had promised her family major donor access to influential networks in exchange for playing the perfect match at public events. She said she felt terrible watching the whole thing unfold at the family dinner, realizing she'd been part of something manipulative and cruel. I just listened, not sure what to say, as she admitted she'd never even wanted to date Enzo and had only agreed because her parents pressured her to make the right connections. She pulled out her phone and showed me a text chain with his mother, proving everything she was saying. In that moment, I realized she was trying to make amends, offering me evidence I might need. We talked for another 20 minutes about family pressure, expectations, and the crushing weight of other people's ambitions. By the end, I felt like we'd formed an unlikely alliance, built on both being caught in the same woman's web of manipulation. That evening, I was scrolling through my phone when I saw it, a tech industry blog post titled, "Boardroom Drama Rocks Unnamed Tech Company." The article was deliberately vague, not naming anyone specifically, but every single detail pointed directly at us. It talked about family dynasties, workplace romances, governance failures, and emergency board votes. I read through it twice, my stomach twisting into knots, then made the mistake of opening the comment section. Hundreds of people were speculating about which company it was, throwing out names and wild theories. Someone had figured it out and posted screenshots from the charity gala with Enzo and Sienna. The comments about me were brutal, dismissive, calling me the office girlfriend, like that was my entire identity. People questioned whether I'd slept my way into my position. Others made crude jokes about gold diggers and social climbers. Not one comment mentioned my actual work, or the campaigns I'd built, or the years I'd spent earning my role. My professional accomplishments had become completely invisible, erased by a narrative that reduced me to someone's girlfriend who caused problems. I closed my phone, sat in the dark of my apartment, feeling exposed and utterly humiliated by strangers who knew nothing about me, but felt entitled to judge everything. Friday morning, I had a consultation with Mercedes Thornton, an employment lawyer a former colleague had recommended. Her office was downtown, in a building with marble floors and expensive art. She met me in a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. I laid out everything for her, showing her the photos of the checks, the timeline of retaliation, the transfer order, the threatening texts. She took notes while I talked, asking specific questions about dates, documentation, who had witnessed what. When I finished, she leaned back and confirmed I had strong retaliation claims, based on the evidence. She explained my rights under employment law, outlined possible outcomes from settlements to litigation, and gave me a framework for protecting myself as this process continued. She talked about documentation requirements, legal timelines, and the importance of routing everything through proper channels. Having someone knowledgeable validate that what happened to me was wrong, that I had legal standing and options, made me feel less powerless than I had in weeks. She couldn't promise specific results, but she gave me tools and knowledge, which felt like the first real weapon I'd had in this fight. That evening, I got home to find a thick envelope from my dad's hospital in the mailbox. I opened it standing in my kitchen, pulling out a bill for $8,000 in uncovered treatment costs. The number stared back at me, black and bold, representing months of my salary and stress I couldn't afford. I sat down at my kitchen table and thought about those checks from his mother. How that money could have covered this bill 3 times over. I thought about how easy it would have been to just take it and disappear and solve all my immediate financial problems. A part of me still wanted to, even now, even after everything. But I'd come too far to back down, invested too much in standing up for myself to fold now over money. I put the bill in my drawer with all the other paperwork from this mess and tried not to calculate how many months it would take to pay it off. Enzo called late Friday night, asking me to lay low publicly while he went through board vetting the following week. His voice was tired and strained as he explained that the board was watching everything, that any public drama or attention could hurt his chances at the permanent CEO position. I understood the logic, could see why he needed things quiet and controlled, but I resented being asked to hide like I was the problem. We argued for the first time in our relationship, truly argued. about whose career and reputation mattered more. He said he was trying to protect both of us by keeping things low-key. I said I was tired of being invisible and managed and treated like a liability instead of a person. He got defensive about the pressure he was under. I got angry about being asked to shrink myself to make his life easier. We both said things we didn't quite mean, frustrated and scared, taking it out on each other because we couldn't take it out on anyone else. The call ended badly, both of us upset, neither of us apologizing. Monday morning, Audrey interviewed Gabriela Castillo, a senior colleague who'd worked with me on several of the campaigns that got sabotaged. I found out later that Gabriela confirmed everything to HR, telling them that my deadlines had been moved without normal approval processes. She explained that the client demands on my accounts had been unusually aggressive compared to other projects running at the same time. She provided specific examples of emails where instructions changed suddenly and requirements escalated without explanation. She told them the whole thing had seemed off to her even before she knew about the bribery and retaliation. Having a credible witness corroborate my experience meant HR couldn't dismiss my claims as personal drama or a misunderstanding. Gabriela's testimony added weight and legitimacy to everything I'd reported, turning my word against his mother's into a documented pattern backed by multiple sources. Tuesday morning, I opened my email to find an anonymous message with the subject line, "Should have taken the money." The body of the email contained veiled threats about making my life difficult, implying that worse things were coming if I didn't back down. My hands were shaking as I read it, recognizing the same tone and phrasing his mother had used in her texts. I forwarded it immediately to Audrey with a note explaining the threatening nature of the content. She responded within an hour, saying she was escalating to legal and triggering additional anti-retaliation protections. The company's security team started tracing the email origin while legal documented it as evidence of ongoing harassment. The threat backfired, giving me more ammunition and proving that the retaliation hadn't stopped just because his mother lost her board seat. By Wednesday afternoon, HR officially rescinded my satellite office transfer and reassigned me to a different product line to reduce conflicts of interest. The new role was in brand strategy, not my original marketing director position, but it wasn't exile either. It came with similar pay and responsibilities, just reporting through a different chain that didn't intersect with Enzo's authority. I read the reassignment letter 3 times, analyzing every word, trying to decide if this was a win or just a different kind of punishment. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than being shipped 2 hours away or frozen out completely. I accepted it as a small win, proof that speaking up had produced at least some positive result, even if it wasn't full vindication. Thursday brought a letter from his mother's attorney threatening a defamation lawsuit for false and damaging statements made in a semi-public forum. The legal language was dense and intimidating, claiming I'd harmed her reputation and professional standing with unsubstantiated allegations. Company counsel called me that afternoon and advised me to make no public statements about anything and to route all communication through legal channels. They assured me the company would provide legal support since the statements were made during an internal investigation. But the letter still scared me. I'd never been threatened with a lawsuit before, never had to think about depositions and court proceedings and legal fees. I forwarded everything to Mercedes, who reviewed it and told me not to worry, that it was a standard intimidation tactic and the claims had no merit given my documented evidence. But knowing something is a tactic doesn't make it feel less threatening when you're the target. Friday afternoon arrived with an email from the board chair requesting a private meeting in his office at 3 p.m. I spent my lunch hour organizing every piece of evidence into a clean timeline with photos, emails, and witness statements attached. The meeting felt like a test I couldn't afford to fail. Jason Thornton's office was on the executive floor, all dark wood and leather furniture that smelled like money and power. He gestured to a chair across from his massive desk and pulled out a yellow legal pad. He asked me to walk through everything from the beginning, and his pen moved steadily across the paper. As I talked, I explained the first check, the second check, the third check, the sudden impossible deadlines, the transfer order that came out of nowhere. He asked specific questions about dates and times, and who witnessed what. His face stayed neutral the whole time, giving me no clue whether he believed me or thought I was just making trouble. After 40 minutes, He set down his pen and looked at me directly. He thanked me for my thoroughness and professionalism, then said the board would review everything carefully. It wasn't a promise or a victory, but it was the first time someone with real power had actually listened to the whole story without interrupting or dismissing it. I walked back to my temporary office feeling like maybe the documentation mattered after all. Saturday morning, I was reviewing budget reports when I noticed a decision had come down from the executive level, cutting my new team's allocation by 15%. The cut came from Enzo's office. I called him immediately, trying to keep my voice steady, asking what happened. He explained it calmly, walking through the financial rationale and company priorities. The decision made sense for the business, but it hurt my team directly. We argued for 20 minutes about whether he should have warned me or handled it differently. He said he couldn't give me special treatment just because we were dating, which I understood logically, but it still felt like a betrayal. We ended the call without really resolving anything, both frustrated and tired. Sunday night, we met at his apartment and had the conversation we'd been avoiding. The scrutiny was too intense right now. Any public relationship milestone would be used against us by his mother or the media, or people who wanted to see us fail. We agreed to keep everything private until the investigation's finished and the shareholder meeting concluded. No announcements, no social media posts, no public appearances together. It felt like moving backward after everything we'd been through. But we both knew the alternative was worse. He held my hand and promised this was temporary, but temporary felt like it could stretch on forever when neither of us knew what the board would ultimately decide. Monday morning, I was scrolling through my phone over coffee when I saw Sienna's post. She announced she was stepping back from any association with the family's business interests to focus on her own philanthropic work. The statement was carefully worded and professional. 10 minutes later, she texted me privately with just 2 words, the unexpected decency from someone who could have stayed silent or sided with his mother meant more than I expected. By noon, the company issued its own statement announcing a comprehensive culture and policy review in response to recent governance concerns. The PR language was deliberately vague, mentioning institutional accountability and workplace standards without naming anyone specifically. I watched the online commentary roll in. Some people praising the company for taking action, while others called it an overreaction to a personal dispute between a mother and son's girlfriend. The split opinions made it clear this wasn't going to be simple or clean. Tuesday afternoon, Audrey forwarded me links to posts appearing on industry forums and review sites. Anonymous accounts were calling me a gold digger who seduced the boss's son for career advancement. The posts questioned my qualifications and suggested I'd slept my way into every position I'd ever held. I felt sick reading them, but forced myself to document everything with screenshots. The company's digital forensics team started tracing IP addresses, while I tried not to refresh the pages obsessively to see what new lies were being posted. Wednesday morning, my dad called saying he felt worse than usual and asking if I could come home. I submitted a personal day request and drove the 2 hours to sit with him through his treatment. He looked smaller in the hospital chair with the 4 in his arm. I held his hand and tried to focus on being present, but my mind kept drifting back to work, to Enzo, to the anonymous posts destroying my reputation. I felt pulled in too many directions, failing at everything because I couldn't give anything my full attention. The weight of juggling the lawsuit threat and the investigation and my dad's health and my relationship and my career became crushing in a way I hadn't let myself acknowledge before. Thursday morning, Mercedes called with news about a retention package she'd negotiated on my behalf. The company was offering anti-retaliation protections in writing, a modest salary increase, and a professional development budget for training and conferences. It wasn't a promotion, but it was a clear signal they wanted to keep me. She walked through every clause carefully, making sure I understood what was protected and what wasn't. I signed the paperwork that afternoon, feeling like I'd won something small but meaningful. Friday brought a new complication when Enzo forwarded me a letter his mother's lawyer had sent to minority shareholders. She was attempting to rally support to challenge the board's emergency vote at an upcoming special meeting. The legal language questioned the procedures used to remove her and demanded a full review of the decision. Her lawyer argued the vote was rushed and improper, lacking the required notice and deliberation. Enzo said the company counsel was preparing defensive materials, but the uncertainty made everyone nervous about what would happen at the shareholder meeting. Monday morning, my new team lead called me into her office with an urgent request. The senior director scheduled to present to our biggest client had food poisoning and couldn't travel. She needed someone to step in and deliver the quarterly strategy review in 3 days. I knew this was a test. Everyone was watching to see if I could handle pressure after everything that happened. I spent the next 72 hours living in conference rooms and my apartment, rehearsing every slide until I could recite the pitch in my sleep. I rewrote sections that felt weak, added data visualizations to strengthen weak points, and practiced my delivery in front of my bathroom mirror at 2 in the morning. Enzo texted asking if I wanted dinner, but I sent back a quick no and kept working. My hands shook every time I thought about standing in front of the client, knowing my professional reputation was hanging by a thread. Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the client's downtown office building carrying my laptop and a backup hard drive. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows and 12 people sitting around an oval table. I set up my materials, connected to their display system, and started talking. The first 5 minutes felt rough, as I found my rhythm. But then something clicked. I answered their questions with specific examples, addressed concerns before they fully formed, and connected our strategy to their business goals in ways that made their marketing VP lean forward and take notes. By the time I finished the presentation, the client's CEO was nodding, and their CFO was already drafting contract language on his tablet. They signed a 3-year extension worth twice the original contract value. My team lead actually smiled at me in front of the whole group and said I delivered the strongest pitch she'd seen all year. Walking out of that building, I felt like a real professional again instead of just the woman from the boardroom scandal. Thursday morning, Audrey sent me an email marked confidential with preliminary investigation findings attached. I opened the PDF in my locked office and read through 8 pages of documented evidence. HR had interviewed 12 witnesses, reviewed hundreds of emails, and traced the timeline of every deadline change and project reassignment. The report confirmed that my workload increased by 40% in the 2 weeks after I rejected the first bribe. It showed that normal approval processes were bypassed for my transfer order. It documented witness statements from colleagues who saw the pattern of impossible demands. Audrey's summary recommended formal sanctions against everyone involved in the retaliation scheme, but she included a warning at the bottom that the process wasn't finished, and I should expect pushback from legal counsel. I saved 3 copies of the report to different drives and felt something close to relief, knowing I hadn't imagined the coordination working against me. That evening, Enzo came over to my apartment, and we sat on my couch, having the conversation we'd been avoiding for weeks. He wanted to know where we stood and what came next. I told him I wanted a future with him, but couldn't make big announcements while everything was under review. He understood the logic, but I could see the disappointment in his face when he realized we were putting our lives on hold for corporate politics. We agreed not to get engaged or make any public relationship milestones until the investigations closed and his vetting finished. It was mature and responsible, but also sad, like we were letting other people's rules control our timeline. He held my hand and promised this was temporary, but temporary felt like it could stretch on forever when neither of us knew what the board would ultimately decide. Friday brought a company-wide email announcing that the shareholders' special meeting was scheduled for 3 weeks out. Company counsel was preparing defensive materials about proper governance procedures and the legal basis for the emergency vote. The uncertainty made everyone tense. People stopped talking when I walked into meetings. Colleagues chose their words carefully, like they were worried about being quoted later. The whole office felt like everyone was walking on ice, testing each step before putting their weight down. I focused on my work and tried not to think about what would happen if the shareholders overturned the board's decision. The following Tuesday, I was digging through old emails, looking for a campaign timeline when I found something that didn't make sense. My transfer order to the satellite office had been personally authorized by Troy Castillo, a VP in operations. That was weird because operations never handled marketing transfers. I pulled up the org chart and confirmed that Troy had no legitimate reason to be involved in that decision. I checked the normal approval chain and found that 3 required signatures were missing. Someone had pushed my transfer through outside standard procedures, and Troy's name was on the authorization. I documented everything with screenshots, wrote a detailed explanation of why the timing and process were irregular, and sent it all to Audrey with a note asking her to investigate this specific approval. 2 days later, Troy resigned. The announcement came through a curt company email saying he was pursuing other opportunities, effective immediately. No farewell party, no transition period, just gone. An hour later, an internal memo from HR confirmed that Troy had violated several company policies during his tenure. The memo didn't name me specifically, but the timing was obvious. My complaint had triggered an investigation that found enough problems to force a resignation. Other colleagues started coming forward with their own stories about Troy bending rules and bypassing procedures. It felt like validation that I wasn't imagining things or overreacting. The retaliation had been real and coordinated, and now there was documented proof that couldn't be dismissed. That weekend, Enzo asked me to consider transferring to a different division temporarily to reduce the appearance of conflicts during his vetting process. I pushed back hard. I'd already been forced into one transfer I didn't want. I wasn't going to accept another one just because it looked better on paper. We spent 3 hours negotiating an alternative approach. Instead of moving me, we create clear documentation of my qualifications and establish a promotion timeline that proved any career advancement was merit-based, not favoritism. We'd have everything reviewed by third-party consultants who could verify that my performance justified my position. Enzo agreed to the plan and promised to present it to the board as a better solution than shuffling me around to make other people comfortable. The next week, we met with HR and legal to submit a detailed recusal and disclosure plan. The document spelled out exactly how we'd handle situations where our relationship could create conflicts of interest. Enzo would abstain from any decisions affecting my division. I would report to someone outside his direct authority. We'd maintain separate professional networks and avoid any appearance of preferential treatment. A third-party compliance monitor would review our adherence quarterly and report findings to the board. HR approved the plan with the quarterly oversight reviews, which felt like structure rather than punishment. It was formal and bureaucratic, but at least it gave us a framework for moving forward instead of just hiding and hoping nobody noticed. Thursday afternoon, Sienna texted, asking if we could talk privately. I met her at a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office where nobody from work would see us. She leaned across the table and warned me that Enzo's mother was preparing a media hit piece through a friendly journalist at a business publication. The story would paint me as a manipulative outsider who seduced her son for money and career advancement. Sienna had heard about it through her family's donor network and wanted me to know what was coming. I thanked her and immediately called the company's PR team. They started preparing counter-narratives and legal responses within the hour. The PR director asked me for a timeline of events and copies of all the documentation so they could get ahead of the story. By evening, we had talking points drafted and a lawyer reviewing options for legal action if the article contained provable lies. The article never ran. Either the PR team's legal threats worked or his mother realized she'd lose more credibility by attacking me publicly. But the shareholders' meeting still loomed 3 weeks away, and I wasn't allowed anywhere near it. Company policy kept me out of governance decisions now that I was part of an active HR case. So I sat at my desk that Tuesday morning, refreshing my phone while Enzo texted me updates from inside the boardroom. The first message came at 9:15 a.m., saying the meeting started and his mother's lawyer was challenging the emergency vote procedures. Then nothing for 40 minutes. My coffee went cold while I stared at the screen. Finally, another text arrived, saying the board chair shut down the procedural challenges and called for the confirmation vote. 10 more minutes of silence. Then the result came through in 3 words. Vote passed. Interim confirmed. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. Another message followed, explaining the vote included enhanced oversight provisions and quarterly reviews of his performance. His mother kept her shares but lost all advisory status and board access. She was officially just another shareholder now, with no operational power. I saved the texts as documentation and forwarded them to Mercedes, then went back to pretending to work on a campaign brief I couldn't focus on. The company announced the culture initiatives 2 days later through an all-hands email that went out at 8 in the morning. Mandatory ethics training for all employees starting next month. Revised reporting procedures for workplace concerns. An independent ombudsman position to handle complaints outside normal HR channels. The email listed 5 other changes, including quarterly culture surveys and updated conflict of interest policies. My name appeared nowhere in any of it. The announcement talked about commitment to accountability and building trust, but never mentioned what actually triggered these changes. I understood why they kept me anonymous. Legal probably advised against naming anyone involved in active cases. But sitting at my desk, reading about reforms I helped create while being completely invisible in the narrative, felt strange. Colleagues forwarded the email around with comments about finally taking workplace issues seriously. Nobody connected it to me. Nobody knew I was the reason any of this existed. I closed my laptop and took a long lunch break, walking around the block, trying to figure out if invisibility was protection or erasure. Audrey scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon to deliver the final findings. I sat across from her in the same conference room where this whole process started, and she slid a folder across the table. The report confirmed that retaliation occurred based on documented timeline changes, witness statements, and email evidence, showing coordination between executives. She recommended sanctions for everyone involved in the scheme, but couldn't share specific details about what happened to them due to privacy rules. What she could tell me was that the findings supported my account completely and consequences were being implemented according to company policy. She asked if I had any questions. I asked if this meant it was really over. She said the investigation was closed, but the compliance monitoring would continue company-wide to prevent similar situations. Then she thanked me for my cooperation and walked me through the final paperwork that officially closed my case file. I signed everything and left, feeling like I'd won something important, but couldn't quite celebrate it. Monday morning brought an email from the vice president of marketing requesting a meeting to discuss my career path. I showed up at her office expecting another transfer announcement, or maybe a suggestion that I'd be happier somewhere else. Instead, she offered me a lateral to upward move into brand strategy, with clear reporting lines that didn't intersect with Enzo's authority. The role came with detailed documentation showing my qualifications, performance reviews, and project outcomes that justified the position based purely on merit. She explained they'd brought in outside consultants to review the promotion to ensure no appearance of favoritism or conflict of interest. Everything was documented and defensible if anyone questioned whether I earned it. Asked about the team structure and responsibilities. She walked me through reporting chains and showed me the organizational chart, proving I'd be 3 levels removed from any decisions Enzo made. It wasn't my dream role, but it was solid work with real responsibility and protection from future interference. I accepted it as the best realistic outcome given everything that happened. Legal counsel finalized the settlement agreement the following week. The document included non-disparagement and non-retaliation clauses protecting me from future interference by anyone involved in the case. I couldn't talk publicly about the details, but the company couldn't retaliate or allow others to retaliate either. Mercedes reviewed every page carefully during a video call and negotiated carve-outs, allowing me to speak truthfully if legally required in future proceedings. She made sure I wasn't completely silenced, just protected from casual disclosure that could hurt me professionally. The settlement also included a modest financial component, covering my legal fees and some compensation for the stress and career disruption. It wasn't life-changing money, but it acknowledged that what happened to me was wrong and cost me something. I signed the final version and sent it back through Mercedes, feeling like I'd gotten as much protection as the system could offer. A colleague I barely knew stopped by my desk the next afternoon. She worked in product development and we'd maybe exchanged 10 words total in the past year. She stood there awkwardly for a moment before saying she was glad I spoke up and that my courage helped other people feel safer reporting problems. She didn't elaborate on what problems or who reported them, just said thank you and walked away before I could respond. The broader social chill from other coworkers remained obvious in how they avoided me in the break room and kept conversations surface level. But that one moment of solidarity meant more than I expected. Someone noticed. Someone appreciated what it cost me to push back against power. I went back to work feeling slightly less alone. My dad called that evening with news that his treatment plan was stabilizing and showing positive results. Better yet, a patient advocate at the hospital had helped restructure the billing to reduce immediate pressure. It wasn't forgiveness of the debt, but it was manageable payments spread over time instead of crushing demands for immediate payment. He sounded lighter than he had in months, joking about how my stubbornness must be genetic since we both refused to take the easy way out. I laughed and felt something tight in my chest finally loosen. The medical bills still existed, but they weren't drowning us anymore. I could breathe about the financial stress for the first time since this whole situation started. The conference invitation arrived via email 2 weeks later. A major industry event wanted me to speak on a panel about compliance and workplace culture. The email praised my courage and leadership in driving positive change. I stared at it for a long time before forwarding it to Mercedes for advice. She called me within an hour, and we talked through the implications. Speaking publicly would raise my profile but also make me the face of corporate drama instead of just a professional doing her job. It could help other people, but it could also define my entire career as the woman who fought her boyfriend's mother. After discussing it thoroughly, I declined politely, choosing to rebuild through quiet competence rather than becoming a public symbol. The conference organizer sent a gracious response, saying they understood and hoped I'd reconsider in the future. Enzo's mother found me in the parking garage one Thursday evening as I was walking to my car. She appeared from behind a concrete pillar and blocked my path. Her voice shook with rage as she blamed me for destroying her family legacy and turning her son against her. She said I was a manipulative opportunist who seduced Enzo for money and status. She called me names I won't repeat and threatened to make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I kept my phone recording in my pocket the entire time, staying calm and responding only to tell her to step back and let me pass. She finally moved after 3 minutes of verbal assault. I got in my car with shaking hands and drove straight to the security office, where I filed a report and provided the audio recording. Security forwarded everything to HR and legal immediately. By morning, there was a formal trespass warning issued and security protocols updated to prevent her from accessing company property. Enzo began the hard work of restructuring the company and proving himself as a leader, which meant 14-hour days and weekend strategy sessions. We went from seeing each other most evenings to maybe twice a week for quick dinners where he was exhausted and distracted. He'd apologize for being absent, but then his phone would buzz, with another crisis requiring immediate attention. We communicated better than before about expectations and boundaries, but the loneliness was real. I'd sit in my apartment at night working on my own projects while he was still at the office managing his. We texted throughout the day, and he always called before bed, but it wasn't the same as actually being together. I reminded myself that distance now might mean stability later. He was building something sustainable, and I was rebuilding my career on solid ground. The foundation we created through crisis felt strong enough to handle temporary separation. At least that's what I told myself on the nights when I really missed him. A few weeks later, I saw Sienna's name in a tech industry newsletter announcing a new education access program for underprivileged students. The initiative had its own website and board of advisors, with no mention of her family's traditional charity networks. She didn't issue any statements about the boardroom drama or distance herself publicly from what happened. She just built something completely separate and moved forward. I texted her a simple congratulations, and she responded with a thumbs-up emoji. It felt like everyone was finding their own way to heal and rebuild without making it a big production. The defamation claim moved forward faster than I expected. Mercedes scheduled me for a deposition at her law firm downtown on a Tuesday morning. I sat in a conference room with wood paneling and leather chairs while his mother's lawyer asked questions designed to make me look calculating and opportunistic. He wanted to know when I first learned about the family's wealth, whether I researched their net worth before dating, if I deliberately positioned myself to meet someone from that social class. Mercedes coached me through staying calm and answering only what was asked without volunteering extra information. The hostile tone wore me down after 2 hours of questioning about my relationship timeline, career ambitions, and financial situation. I kept my answers short and factual while the lawyer tried to paint me as someone who seduced her way into money and status. When we finally finished, Mercedes walked me to my car and told me I did well, holding steady under pressure. The process felt draining in a way that had nothing to do with truth or justice, and everything to do with endurance. Back at work, my new team launched a major campaign for a financial services client that I'd been developing for months. The results came in better than projected, with measurable increases in customer engagement and positive feedback in the client's quarterly review. My team lead documented the success in performance reviews and brought it up in the next department meeting as an example of effective strategy execution. Colleagues who'd been distant started acknowledging my work again in small ways, nodding in hallways or including me in project discussions. The professional reputation I'd been rebuilding through quiet competence was finally showing concrete results. Nobody mentioned the drama or asked about the investigation. They just responded to the work itself, which felt like the cleanest possible validation. I drove to my dad's place that Friday evening and stayed through the weekend. Saturday afternoon, sitting on his back porch with coffee, I finally told him everything. The 3 checks totaling $300,000, the parking garage confrontation, the depositions, and legal threats. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time, staring at his coffee mug. Then he said he was proud I didn't compromise my integrity, even when taking the money would have solved both our problems. We sat together with that complexity hanging between us, the knowledge that doing the right thing had costs we were both still paying. He squeezed my hand and told me he'd rather struggle with medical bills than watch me lose myself for cash. I cried a little, and he did too. And we didn't try to make it okay or pretend the choice was easy. Monday brought a board meeting where budget allocations for next quarter were being finalized. My division's request for additional marketing spend was on the agenda. I wasn't in the room, but heard about it later from my team lead. When the vote came up, Enzo abstained completely, citing the conflict protocols we'd established with HR. He didn't argue for or against the request, just removed himself from the decision entirely. Other executives noticed, and one of them apparently commented that his adherence to governance rules showed strong ethical leadership. The board approved our budget request on its merits, without his input. My team lead seemed impressed that Enzo followed the protocols even when it meant giving up influence over decisions that affected me. It helped his credibility as someone who takes conflict management seriously instead of just paying lip service to corporate policies. Thursday afternoon, Audrey called me into her office and officially closed my case file. She showed me documentation that all recommended actions had been completed, including policy updates, mandatory training for executives, and revised reporting procedures. The company appointed a compliance monitor to track similar issues company-wide and ensure the new systems were actually being used. Audrey told me my case created precedent for how the organization handles executive wrongdoing and retaliation claims. I wasn't named in any public communications, but she made sure I understood that my willingness to document everything and push through the process had resulted in meaningful institutional change. The closure felt anticlimactic after months of stress, but also solid. The paper trail was complete, and the systems were in place. That weekend, Enzo and I drove to a small cabin 2 hours north with no internet and terrible cell reception. We'd agreed beforehand not to discuss work or family drama or any of the ongoing legal situations. Friday night, we cooked dinner together, and Saturday we hiked through woods that smelled like pine and damp earth. We didn't talk about proposals or timelines or what our future looked like. We just existed together in the present moment, remembering why we chose each other in the first place. Sunday morning, we sat on the porch drinking coffee and watching fog lift off the lake. The quiet felt healing in a way that had nothing to do with solving problems and everything to do with just being together without pressure or performance. Monday morning, I walked into the office and dove straight into project work. The scars from everything remained visible in the careful way some colleagues interacted with me and the professional distance others maintained. But I had my support systems in place and clear boundaries established. I knew which battles to fight and which situations to document. The normalcy felt fragile but real, like I was rebuilding something sustainable rather than just surviving day to day. A junior employee named Sarah from the operations team asked if she could grab coffee and talk through some workplace challenges she was facing. We met at the cafe downstairs, and she told me about a manager who was taking credit for her work and making subtle threats when she tried to push back. I shared lessons about documentation, knowing your rights, and building alliances with people who have institutional credibility. I walked her through how to create paper trails and when to escalate versus when to handle things directly. Helping someone else navigate similar dynamics felt like turning my experience into something useful beyond just surviving it. She thanked me and said she felt less alone knowing someone else had faced retaliation and come through it. 3 months later, the Compliance Monitor issued their first quarterly report to the board. The document noted improved reporting culture across departments and reduced fear of retaliation when employees raised concerns. Anonymous survey data showed increased trust in HR processes and willingness to use formal complaint channels. I wasn't named anywhere in the report, but I knew my case was the catalyst that forced the company to take these issues seriously. Seeing systemic change emerge from personal pain felt meaningful in a way I hadn't expected. The individual battle I'd fought had created openings for other people to speak up and expect accountability. That ripple effect mattered more than any personal vindication. 2 weeks later, the board announced Enzo's permanent appointment as CEO after he completed the full vetting process and led the company through major restructuring without any conflicts. His mother kept her shares but had zero operational control, which meant she could complain at shareholder meetings but couldn't interfere with daily decisions. The tension remained visible whenever quarterly reports went out, but the boundaries were clear and enforceable now. I watched him handle the pressure of proving himself while managing his mother's ongoing resentment, and he did it without asking me to hide or compromise my position. The HR director called me into her office on a Friday afternoon to discuss a new senior brand strategist role with my own team reporting to me. She walked me through the transparent selection process, showed me the documented justification based on my campaign results and client retention numbers, and explained that 3 other candidates were considered through the same criteria. The promotion felt earned rather than given, like I'd actually proved my value through work instead of surviving drama. I stopped questioning whether I belonged there and started focusing on building something meaningful with my new team. My dad called that same week with news that his latest scans showed positive results and his treatment protocol was complete. The medical bills still added up to a scary number, but the payment plan made it manageable instead of crushing, and he joked that my stubbornness about refusing bribe money must have come straight from his side of the family. We laughed about it, but I could hear the relief in his voice, knowing the worst was behind him. Enzo and I celebrated our 1-year anniversary on a quiet Tuesday night at home with takeout and a bottle of wine. We sat on the couch talking about everything we'd survived together, from his mother's bribes to boardroom votes to HR investigations to his vetting process. Neither of us brought up engagement rings or wedding timelines or future plans that felt too big to discuss yet. We just acknowledged that we'd built something real through crisis instead of despite it. Something that felt solid enough to last because we'd already tested it under the worst possible conditions. He fell asleep with his head on my shoulder, and I stayed awake, thinking about how different this moment felt from that first check on the Persian rug. How choosing the hard path had led somewhere worth being. What a ride, huh? I still can't quite believe it all happened. Honestly, it changed everything about how I see the world and myself. Have you ever had to stand up to someone with immense power, knowing it could cost you everything? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.